Really? Oh, that's so pretty.
Good.
I hope that's organic and sustainable and fair trade.
It's fair trade. It's farm fresh.
Gluten-free.
Good.
0 calories.
Exactly.
That's the way.
It's air. Awesome. Good morning, everyone. We see you guys all coming in. We're so excited.
Good morning, Sarah.
Oh my gosh.
I love seeing you all together. Just gonna say that right now out loud.
I told her, I was like, this is the closest I've been to someone in like 2 months. I was like, I don't even know.
Yeah.
This is special. Super special.
We've co-quarantined.
Yeah, I've been on her front porch, knocking on her door. I'm so lonely.
Same.
Yeah. Awesome. See, people are popping in here.
We're just giving everyone time to log in.
Awesome. And feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're chiming in from. We'd love that. We're so excited that you guys are all here.
Tell us what your drink of choice is for
Yes.
brunch.
If you're brunching or lunching or having brunch for dinner.
Coffee.
Coffee.
Yeah, all the way.
Depending on where you're chiming in from. All right.
Tacoma.
Whoop, whoop.
Somebody already got a quiche ready. I'm very impressed.
Wow.
Also, if you have a great delivery, a restaurant that you got a really great delivery from and you want to let everyone in on it, feel free to share that as well.
Yes.
I didn't make the quiche, by the way.
No.
I bought it.
Impressed. Your breakfast is fancier than mine, so.
We're filled with coffee.
Yeah, maybe a little too much. We'll see how fast the talking is.
Yes. All right, so we're gonna still continue to admit people as they get in, but we also recognize we want to be really respectful of everyone's time, and with Zoom, we also recognize sometimes the attention span, and some of you guys have kids running around and things like that. So we want to go ahead and get started. So we're super excited that you guys are all here with us this morning. Thank you for joining in from wherever you are around the world. We're super excited to dive in and introduce Dr. Leaf to you. Just really quick, that's our agenda for today. We'll do welcome introductions. We'll do the scope of event with Sarah. We'll have introduce Dr. Leaf. We'll do some Q&A at the end and then close out. So I have the power to do that. Wahaha. Mute all.
That was good.
Yeah.
You got some power there.
Exactly. Yes, we felt it. Perfect. All right, so
Rolling with the quarantine punches.
we're just going with it. And we're thankful for that you're here, and we just want to create a brunch experience. As much as we'd love to be in person with you all right now, we're doing it virtual style. So thank you so much for bearing with us as we learn. Just before we get started and I introduce our first guest, we're going to do a quick cheers break. Cheers. Privilege it is to create space with you this morning for community. And as much as we would absolutely love to be surrounded in a table right now, due to the current environment that our world is in, we're not there yet, but that has allowed us the opportunity to get really creative and actually really meaningful for me, because we have gotten the opportunity to do this is our second global virtual brunch now, where we get to connect with women from around the world, which typically we wouldn't have been able to do that in a traditional brunch setting. However, we do want to create the table for you this morning and just let you know that you are welcome here. Gals at Brunch, I like to think about is as a family, and we make space for that. We also want to recognize the current circumstances in our world right now, everything surrounding the coronavirus, and then the last couple of weeks, the heartache and heartbreak around racial injustice, and recognize that has actually even probably made it a little bit more challenging to show up and be present this morning with some of the trauma and emotional exhaustion that has been surrounded around what's going on in our world right now. And just want to let you guys know that we stand with you, that Gals at Brunch is committed to being a diverse and inclusive community where everybody has a seat and a voice at the table, and we have an ear to listen, that we are committed to being peacemakers and bridge builders, and hope that we can bring healing to the world through being able to just sit with one another and recognize the human experience before anything else. So, like I said, thank you so much. Also, you know, before we get started here, without further ado, would love to introduce myself. My name is Tiffany Accardi, and I'm the founder of Gals at Brunch. Gals at Brunch is a global organization, and we have over 110 chapters around the world. I work with an incredible team of board members and literally the most incredible, talented, and extraordinary group of city leaders and volunteers that are located around the world that help us cultivate community. And just kind of diving into the fastest intro ever, because we want to be super respectful of everyone's time. I was actually raised by my grandma and single mom, but grew up with some really challenging and even sometimes traumatic family dynamics and circumstances that have all been so redeemed today. But if it weren't for those, I literally may not be here today. My life calling has literally been set aside since the makeup of who I was, because I was literally raised by a village. I was raised by some of the most brilliant human beings, made up of different generations, different socioeconomic dynamics, different colors, different seasons and times. And now my spirit carries each and every one of those with me. And I have the profound gift to offer that to you all for the rest of my life, to help forge community and to create a space for community in some place that feels like home. I started Gals at Brunch almost 5 years ago. After one of the most heartbreaking seasons of my life, I was sitting in an ache of hope deferred, and I was about to make my third cross-country move in 5 years, and I couldn't believe that I was going to put myself in a position of not knowing a soul again and having to just rebuild my life. I started Gals at Brunch with the intention of creating community. However, I do Gals at Brunch because I never want another woman to ever walk through life without being able to easily and accessibly be able to find her tribe, community, and a sense of belonging. In Gals at Brunch, yes, we do brunch, and we're always on the search for the best brunches, but it's bigger than brunch. It is within community that I believe that we get the biggest opportunity to become part of something so much bigger, like we're doing here today. In this community, you are seen, you belong, and you are worthy to be known in all the gloriousness of who you were created to be, regardless of background, socioeconomic, race, color of your skin. And in this community, on the days that feel like it's been tougher, or like talk about an entire year or almost a year 2020, we're here to remind you how loved, how valued, and how incredible you are, and how much we believe in you. And when a group of women come together to do just that, it changes lives, atmospheres, cities, and our world. We believe that the table brings some of the most healing to our land, and our vision is that we set the table to empower women and create space for community. So thank you so much for being here. We are so very grateful. I am absolutely, honestly floored the last couple of weeks. My mind has just been spinning and thinking about what a beautiful opportunity and honor it is to get to be able to host Dr. Caroline Leaf this morning. She has literally been a cornerstone in my life as I have chased after becoming the best possible version of myself. She breaks down such an important topic that we should be widely known and talking about in today, such as mental health, and takes away the stigmas that have been created around it, and provides bite-sized pieces that are in a really tangible way, allowing our society and breaking off generations of mental health issues, and that there are solutions and an ability to move forward and to navigate that. So we're super excited and honored that she is spending this morning with us. I also want to take a moment and transition us to one of my very best friends, Sarah Caleb. Sarah Caleb is a gift, an absolute gift for all that come to know her. But I actually have the privilege of also getting to call her one of my very best friends. She's a nurse. She's an incredible personal and professional consultant with a company called Revenue Tribe. Seriously, look them up. I have done a ton of work with Sarah through Revenue Tribe, and it's been absolutely some of the most transformative steps that I have taken in my life to date. And she just champions people so beautifully, comes alongside people so beautifully, and just continues to call out the gold in a really beautiful, kind and encouraging way. And so it is such an honor to co-host this space with her this morning. And so I am going to give it over to my beautiful friend, Sarah Caleb. Please join me in welcoming her today. You take us away.
Thank you. So welcome everybody. As she said, I'm Sarah Caleb and I am an oncology nurse here in the LA area. I started out working in nursing in critical care, and I've been so inspired by the community that you have here at Gals at Brunch that I talked about. And when we did the first global Gals at Brunch, it was right in the heat of pandemic, of course, and quarantine, and just listening to all the stories of how you guys are really rallying behind your communities and coming together, I was so inspired. And I also noticed how many people in your network are in healthcare, are in the front lines, are working in these fields. And so I really realized that I was so passionate about coming alongside you the way you've come alongside others, that we talked about, let's just do a brunch for the front lines. So originally we had designed this for people in mental health, social work, people that are still considered essential and out in the heat of pandemic. But then as pandemic kind of rolled into everything that we're seeing right now with racial injustice and rioting and the fight for the voice, we really realized that the topic that we're going to go over today, which I'll dive into a little bit deeper, is actually much more relevant than to just the medical community alone. So we had originally geared up with Dr. Leaf to bring this into the medical community, but please be listening for any other public service fields that you feel like this would be appropriate for, because this brunch will be to bring awareness and empowerment and resources, but we're also looking to change the system as well. So we'll do a call to action at the end that we can get more involved with, but we're just going to dig into the topic for today's brunch, which is compassion fatigue. So again, the language will be directed more towards people in the medical community, but I think this is far more reaching and very important for right now. So when I first started out my career as a baby new grad nurse in critical care, I was required to go to a training on what the medical community calls compassion fatigue and provider burnout. And just for like a Merriam-Webster definition of compassion fatigue, related to the medical community, it's the physical and mental exhaustion and emotional withdrawal experienced by those who care for sick or traumatized people over an extended period of time. When speaking in general, though, it's the apathy or indifference towards the suffering of others as the result of overexposure to tragic news stories and images and the subsequent appeals for assistance. And I think that that is very relevant to us right now. Tim Jarvis had a quote that I feel like really sums it up, but compassion fatigue results from taking on the emotional burden of a patient's agony. And so basically, to sum it up in a sentence, compassion fatigue is when the repeat exposure of pain that you can't control causes you to disconnect from your own empathy, and a feeling of disassociation and hopelessness can kind of seep into either your professional, your personal life. None of it stays compartmentalized. And so during this training, they told us that basically what happens is when you're in a field where you're repeatedly exposed to the tragedy and trauma of others, the same chemicals fire in your brain as if they were, as if the traumas you were watching were happening to you yourself or your loved ones. And they said that repeat exposure to that type of brain chemistry, to that type of emotional climate, can create this condition that they've labeled compassion fatigue, also known as secondary traumatic stress. And this can manifest in a lot of different ways. It's an overwhelming feeling of disconnect. If we have the slide for the symptoms that goes over lowered concentration, rigid thinking, perfectionism, preoccupation with trauma, withdrawal and sleep disturbances, hypervigilance. It's basically just when you're on alert all the time, you're in fight or flight mode, regardless of where you are. That elevated startle response, you're feeling guilt, anger, numbness, sadness, helplessness that you can't quite explain because, again, a lot of these traumas aren't yours. And so you can't attach it to your personal story. And then it can manifest in our bodies all the way to increased heart rate, trouble breathing, an impaired immune system, and just an increased severity of being like a hypochondria, of concern with medical issues for ourselves. And so what they described, they gave a lot of illustrations of why this happens, because when we're in a public service field, when we're in a field designed to care for others, a lot of times we are having to operate counter towards the normal human experience. And one of the examples that they gave that was so powerful to me was they talked about the different divisions of the autonomic nervous system. I won't get too technical for everyone, but if you're not familiar, just to break it down, you basically have two divisions of your autonomic nervous system. The parasympathetic, which is the rest and relax and be present and aware system, where you have the capacity for higher level thinking, really fine specific motor skills for your hands to do really detailed work, higher level communication and contemplation. And then you have your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight nervous system, where it's basically all hands on deck in your body. Blood gets shunted away from all non-essential organs to where you can only do what you would need to do to fight, run away and freeze, or to hide. And so you basically only have like broad motor skills for your body that are available. Communication shuts down, higher level thinking, and you basically go into your primitive survival brain. And when you're in a situation of public service where you're listening to the traumas of people, or for example, a code blue where you're doing CPR on somebody, their heart has stopped and you're having to beat it for them, you immediately go into the sympathetic, the fight or flight survival nervous system, but actually the nervous system that you need to be operating in, because is the parasympathetic nervous system, because you're doing very technical things, starting IVs, trying to place a breathing tube, communicating clearly with a large room of people, communicating tactfully with a family member who is horrified, and also trying to think of the higher level of what's causing this code that you're dealing with. And so they basically said, in summary, it really stuck with me that to do what you do, oftentimes you have to work on the daily basis in violation of your own physiology. And when you break connection with that physiology, it's almost in a disassociative state that's not an easy connection to break. And when you break it, it can be very hard to reconnect again. You don't always have the control. And it's hard to connect with feelings and higher level thinking because you need to operate and survive. And what we see is the buildup of that state over time is just a general hopelessness and withdrawn feeling and an inability to connect and process and move forward. And one of the most powerful things that they kept saying was, to do what you have to do is to disconnect with your feelings, but to be disconnected with the feelings of others is to basically become a sociopath. And so many of you are trying to force yourself into the mindset of a sociopath and still be compassionate and empathetic, and wondering why you're having trouble functioning in your personal lives. So it was really powerful. It made me really look at, wow, I don't feel like a crazy person. This brings language to the tension that I've had trying to operate in this field. But the problem was so beautifully articulated, but the solution seemed very impractical and ineffective. And I remember walking away thinking, wow, I actually feel more vulnerable and hopeless than I did before. And it wasn't actually until I came into contact with Dr. Leaf and her amazing work that I started to feel hope again, that I could actually do my job, because she brings data and research, and the groundbreaking work that she has done in helping people process really fired me back up again. I've seen people talk about solutions, but never in a personal way that is backed up by evidence and research. And when I had encountered her work, I realized, wow, I don't actually have to live in the pendulum swing of being disconnected and going through like a cynical zombie, or being overly emotional and drowning in my emotions. I can actually learn how to bring it all together and process as a human again. So Dr. Leaf is a highly credentialed communication pathologist and cognitive neuroscientist who specializes in cognitive and metacognitive neuropsychology. She has been one of the first in her field to do research on neuroplasticity, which is basically how the brain itself can change with input. And she has gone all over the world in all sorts of communities to help people overcome things, everything from attention deficit disorder and trouble with learning disabilities, to a real traumatic brain injury from drowning and accidents and things like that, to trauma and abuse. And I have never before experienced somebody that is so beautifully able to bring the worlds of the brain, the mind, the body, and the soul all together. And she's not just changing the way that the scientific community relates to the mind and the brain, she's changing the way our society relates to our own humanity. So it is a great honor to have you here, Dr. Leaf, and we cannot wait to hear what you have to say. One moment, sorry. This is the part where you choose.
There you go. Can you hear me now? Okay, I can't hear you, but can you hear me? Okay, good. Fantastic. All right. Hi, everyone. Sarah, thank you for that beautiful introduction. I'm very honored to just to be with you all today and to talk about this incredibly important subject. And I mean, this is really just the start of a discussion. Sarah and I met a couple of months back, and we've had a couple of discussions, and I'm extremely impressed with your eloquence on how you've summarized this whole concept, and, you know, Tiffany, for what you've done, putting this whole concept together as well, this whole girls brunch. What did I just said wrong? Right, whatever. Okay, so us together, girls at brunch. I'm going to throw in a bit of South Africanisms there. But this is I've been in this field for 38 years. I began in the 80s, and I remember my professors in neuroscience telling us that the brain can't change. And at that stage, my interest was very piqued, because I was already fascinated. We were already dissecting brains and already learning all about all this information. And here I get told, well, the brain can't change, but it went counter to what I understood humans to be functioning, how they functioned. And it went counter to all the philosophy I'd been studying and all the spiritual stuff and all the other scientific information we were being given. So I decided to start researching neuroplasticity with an area, traumatic brain injury. And in the 80s, there was very little research on traumatic brain injury, then called closed head injury. And it was pretty much, we were literally told, don't bother doing anything except compensatory strategies for your patients, because the brain can't change. And once someone's got that level of damage, there's nothing you could do. And that applied then, they carried that over into mental health. As we know, mental health management has been an absolute disaster and still is. So this just challenged me, and I started working with the worst traumatic brain injured patients I could find to show that if you can, our minds can overcome our biology. That's pretty much what I was trying to show, that yes, we have nurture, yes, we have nature, but we have the I factor. And I wanted to tap into that I factor, that mind factor, that what is mind. And if we direct our attention, can we change the way that we function in terms of our behavioral output, cognitive, social, emotional, intellectual, etc.? And can that make a difference in our brain? Neuroplasticity wasn't spoken about much at that stage, because it was more in the 90s that it became a big thing. And with the advent of technology, we had limited technology in the 80s, as you know. And then from the mid-90s, neuroplasticity was accepted. So long story short, I went from that kind of research into researching the mind. I went underground. I always call it go underground. I went into the trenches. I was working in South Africa, from working with traumatic brain injury and head injury and learning disabilities. I also worked a lot with trauma. I worked in the then apartheid South Africa in the it's very current. If you follow me on social media, you'll see that I've been speaking a lot about this, but I saw what racism does to people. I worked 3 days a week in the worst of the worst places for 25 years, and I saw what racism did to societies and emotions and the damage. And that combination of, I went into those communities to help them learn, help them use their brain, help them learn how to learn so they could get educated and learn how to manage the mental trauma and emotional trauma of what they had gone through. And so I saw directly firsthand, and I learned on the ground what the resilience of the human mind is. I learned that despite whatever circumstance, when you teach someone about the mind, you can change you can change outcomes. And I saw incredible outcomes. And then I did quite a lot of research, my master's, PhD in various different areas, and then spent a lot of time researching this mind-brain concept. And now I've started another series of clinical trials. I did 2 last year, and we are now launching into a whole series of clinical trials. The reason why I've done it this way is I did my initial hardcore research, then I wanted to go into the field and understand exactly how humans function, what mind is, how mind changes brain in every walk of life. So from the wealthiest of the wealthy to the poorest of the poor, in as many circumstances as I could. I even worked in Rwanda post-genocide for a bit. And so it's quite a wide experience. And I've brought that to the table, updated my research over the years, and now I'm doing formal clinical trials. We just did 2, and I'm going to share a little bit of that information with you. We've been in the analysis process now over, interestingly enough, this time of COVID gave me time to actually find the time to do the analysis and write up another book and so on. So I'm going to be sharing some of that research with you today. But my message for you, in essence, is that your mind is what we need to start with. Mind is what changes biology. And I have to tell you this, I interview a lot of people. Just the other day, I interviewed a psychopath who is a neuroscientist at UCLA, and he's a very famous psychopath and a very famous neuroscientist. And he talked about how he never acted out on his what he went through. He studied psychopaths, so he didn't even realize he was one, but he kind of did. And he did a lot of work with SPECT scans, and he still does, and with different types of scanning and diffuser tensor imaging and so on. And so he's pretty famous for identifying the so-called psychopathic mind. And then he was part of a control group, and they found out that he has exactly those genetics. The brain imagery showed that he had that kind of the reduced amygdala, PFC, frontal cortex, all the pattern. And obviously that's a big nature component. His biology set him up, yet he had been married to the same woman he met at 13. He's 74. He basically has been an incredibly successful scientist, done incredible work in stem cell area as well. And when in my interview with him, at the end, he actually said mind overcomes biology. And he, interestingly enough, said it took him around about 3, once he actually was identified in this control group as having a psychopathic brain, it confirmed a few things for him, but he realized he'd used his mind to change his brain. So I bring that in as an example, because it's an example that is very powerful, because people are told psychopaths can't change their brain. That's it. Once a psychopath, always a psychopath. And this scientist has shown that's not the case. This is what I've spent 38 years showing as well. I had so many patients of mine that were written off by the medical community as vegetables who ended up getting degrees. And what we did was teach them about their mind. So first of all, what is mind? What is brain? What is this relationship? And yes, there's all the philosophy, which I'm not going to go into. I've got lots of books, you can read them. But essentially, dualism is seen as something bad, and then we've gone from dualism to seeing the brain is producing the mind, and we're in the era now of neuroreductionism, where it's brain, and you are your brain. And so, just in case you don't know what a brain looks like, I'm just making a joke, because you as nurses all know what a brain looks like. So, medical community, I love you hauling this brain out when I do talks, because people always, if you're not used to seeing a brain, it can be scary. I did that at university when we were studying the brain, and we had skeletons and we were studying them, and I had a real live head in my bag and was in the dorm, and we were at breakfast and I couldn't find something, and I hauled out the skeleton and put it on the table to find what I needed, and didn't know why the whole dining room was screaming. But those are you kind of get used to those weird things when you, as you know, in the medical world. Okay, so in my journey, I have tried to understand mind versus brain and the mind-brain body connection. There's 150 years of research. This is not new. And the research in the mind-brain research is unbelievably significantly powerful. So in my most recent research, I showed that when you use your mind, and I'm going to start with my most recent, I'm going to backtrack, I'm going to show you some slides, I'm going to give you a big picture. This is obviously not a full course, so it's just a big picture, bird's eye view of everything to create awareness. But essentially, I showed that when you use your mind to change your brain, you can overcome that traumatic brain injury. You can literally stay or stop Alzheimer's going backwards, the dementias. You can improve learning disabilities. You can change the way that your cognitive, social, and emotional functioning levels. I showed in my most recent trials many things. One of them was that we reduced we reduced anxiety by 81%. Depression by 81%. I mean, these are huge factors. And interestingly enough, the time frame of all the research that I've been doing, because parallel to understanding mind and brain, I've been looking at, what is a thought? How does it form? What's the relationship between thought and memory? What is long-term memory? What is short-term memory? What is this in the brain? What is it? What are emotions? Because there's a lot of words thrown out there, but it isn't a coherent, there isn't really a coherent understanding. And people use these words very interchangeably. And yet if we understand what they are, it makes it so much easier. So in my research, I've tried to study that and how thought forms and how long does it take for a thought to form, and what is a memory versus a thought, and what is long-term versus short-term memory, and what does that look like in the brain, and where is thought stored, and all that kind of stuff. So in a nutshell, learning is something that we as humans are doing all the time. Learning is thought building. So during the day, you are always building thoughts. At nighttime, you sort out the thoughts that you're building. This building of thoughts and the sorting out of thoughts is mind in action. So let's go back to defining what mind is. Let's define what brain is and body. And let's define, and once you've got that definition, it's going to be a lot easier to unpack this in a little bit more depth. So mind, in the most simple definition, after 38 years of research, mind is simply the following: how you think and feel and choose. Okay, so you are always thinking, you're always feeling. When you think, you feel, and when you think and feel, you choose. You're doing this all the time. Think and feel and choose is a triad. They go together. You think, as you think, you will feel. As you think and feel, you will choose. You're doing this at 400 billion actions per second on a non-conscious level. And I'm going to define unconscious, subconscious, conscious, and unconscious. 4 different things I'm going to define for you in a moment. But first of all, mind. Mind is thinking, feeling, choosing. When you think, you feel. When you think and feel, you choose. You're doing this at around about 10 to the 27 on an unconscious level. On a conscious level, you're doing this around about 40 times a second, or 2,000 actions per second is the 2 different ways that you can look at it. And you are consciously aware of your conscious thinking every 10 seconds. So we are actually scientifically designed to be consciously aware of our thinking, feeling, and choosing every 10 seconds, which is 6 times a minute, which is all the time. We're very designed to be self-aware. We are designed for self-awareness, and self-awareness brings with it self-regulation. And without self-awareness and self-regulation, we will land up in compassion fatigue, in burnout, in all the emotional and mental stuff that we get ourselves into: anxiety, depression, burnout. These are just descriptions. They're not illnesses. They are descriptions. And there's obviously your extreme ends, and you've got your more neutral area in the middle. But as humans, these are descriptions of life experiences. So they're the big word. depression, anxiety, OCD, schizophrenia, burnout, all these, compassion fatigue, these are all big descriptors of underlying causes. As Sarah so eloquently explained at the beginning, compassion fatigue in terms of the medical world is relating very much to you having to deal constantly with being on high alert and dealing with trauma constantly on a constant high cycle. If you think of the racism currently going on, these people, the world, the community, the African American community globally, the Black community globally is on high alert constantly. They can't go outside without having a level of anxiety that as white people we cannot even understand. So they're living in this perpetual state of anxiety, and that's relating to a cause, and the cause being racism, and then their individual experiences. When it comes to the medical community, the depression, anxiety, compassion fatigue, burnout, etc., all of that, all of the above, they're generally comorbid, as we know, that has got an underlying cause, which is the lifestyle that you're having to live every single day, as you said. So clearly, Sarah, you're doing a code blue, and you've got to now have this intellectual ability to analyze, as well as going through the actual physical motion of keeping that patient alive as long as you can, and trying to work out why they're in a code in the first place. So there's and the message of this is where Sarah's really hit the nail on the head. There's a good analysis of what's going wrong. We can all talk, there's tons of research telling us, but there isn't a lot of research saying, well, what do we do about that? And most of the time when you go on courses to deal with all these things, anxiety, compassion fatigue, etc., which are mind in action, which are happening because of our mind in action, because we're experiencing life, most of the time it's addressed with meditation and breathing. And don't get me wrong, I'm totally a fan of both of those. But meditation, breathing, tapping, these are all phenomenal, absolutely powerful techniques, acupuncture, etc. But they are preparation. And they have to go along with an area that is incredibly misunderstood, misrepresented, and not paid attention to enough, and that's mind management. So what I decided to study is mind management. So if mind is thinking, feeling, and choosing, what is mind management? It's managing your thinking, feeling, and choosing. You're always thinking, always feeling, always choosing 24/7. So your mind is always in action 24/7. Your mind is in action during the course of the day to build, well, when you wake, to build thoughts. And we'll talk about that as well in a moment. And your mind at night is sorting out the thoughts that you have built during the day. So that process of mind in action is in response to life. So you open your eyes in the morning, and it's the texts, the emails, the relationships, spouses, kids, work, whatever, as you go to work experience. So in other words, you are always updating your experience. You are always changing your brain. Your brain is never the same. So your brain is not your mind. How is your brain changing? With your mind. So your mind changes your brain. Your brain doesn't produce your mind, which is what the neuroreductionistic focus is. But if you look at the studies, which is what I've spent all these years looking at, is the actual studies take a mind action, identify a brain change through whatever technology, and then they say the brain produced that change back to front. We have to look at the fact that if someone's dead, their brain's not doing anything. That energy that brings life is not there. So that energy is mind. Mind is this biggest part of us. We can talk about it as the spiritual. We can talk about it as the non-physical. We can talk about it in terms of quantum physics, which is what I do a lot of to try and understand and help people process mind. But essentially, mind is the biggest part of us. Mind is the 99%. 99% of who we are, and that's obviously a rough estimate, but it's pretty close. The 99% mind is the most unaddressed part of humanity. Okay. Yet it's the thing that's driving humanity. Without your mind, you're not you. Your mind is you. So we have to address it. So we've tried to address it. And for the last 60 years, the way we've tried to address it is through very reductionistic methods, through the biomedical model, which is a phenomenal model, thank God, for the biomedical model when it comes to the physical brain and the physical body. It is a perfect model for that, a model that is very advanced. But when you try and take that model and apply it to mind management, it doesn't work. And the way it's been done is through, labeling, looking for a symptom, diagnosing based on a symptom, and then treating chemically most of the time, or with very prepackaged cognitive behavior therapy type techniques. Now, I'm not slamming cognitive behavior therapy. It has its place, but its place is at point number 5. So what do I mean there? We, with our mind, management have to go through phases. The first phase is you have to prepare your mind. The second phase is you have to actually learn to manage your mind. And then part of that mind management is, which is 5 steps, is the 5th step is actions. And that's where cognitive behavior therapy can be put into place. Mind is happening all the time. Mind in action. Mind is thinking, feeling, choosing. Mind is not your brain. Mind and brain are separate but inseparable. Your mind is energy. It moves through your brain. Your brain is a responder, a very highly sophisticated responder, but it responds to mind. So you're thinking, feeling, and choosing. And now this is quantum physics. This is neuroscience. This is 150 years of research backing this kind of thinking up, and very, very accurate research. In fact, this kind of research is a lot more accurate than the classical neuroreductionistic research when you start pulling it apart and looking at actually what's going on, which is very interesting. But it's much easier to go with reductionistic research, classical kind of research, because it's measurable. And we also in this era are very quantifiable. We want to measure everything with numbers, but you can't measure everything with numbers if you don't have a broader perspective. So based on that, now let's just talk a little bit more about mind, and let's talk about the divisions of mind. But before I do that, I'm going to show you a slide. So I'm going to share, is my screen, let me get the screen shared with you. And I'm going to show you a slide that'll help you. Okay, so here we go. Let me just move my papers out the way. So I'm going to share a screen with you. Let's see now. Why is this not moving? Okay, we've got sorry, I'm just trying to get these slides to move. Okay, you'll have to call in. Okay, so we're trying to get this. We're going to just call in one of our technology people to come and help us here. And Alex, oh, here we go. There you go. Got it. Ha, thank you. Got someone to help me. Okay, so what you're seeing on the screen is from the it's called the glass brain. It's from a very famous lab. It's not my lab. I have permission to use this, but it is one of the most powerful ways of understanding mind. So there's a brain. This is a real person hooked up to this. Their brain hooked up to very advanced brain technology. I use QEEGs in my research. This is a mixture of QEEGs, and they've used diffuser tensor imaging, and they've used some fMRI as well. And what you're seeing there, the light shining, literally is mind. So this person is thinking, feeling, and choosing. Their instruction was to think, feel, and choose about various different things. And as they are thinking, feeling, and choosing, energy is being generated through the brain, and the brain is responding on a quantum level, on an electrochemical level, and an electromagnetic level, and on a genetic level. So the pattern for every person now, if you all were linked up to the same technology, we would see this in your brain, but we wouldn't see the same pattern because you each have your own unique way of thinking, feeling, and choosing. So when I say that the mind and brain are separate but inseparable, we see this in this image. So the brain is what we have to use to express the mind through, and where we store our thoughts, but the brain is not producing that. That is your thinking moving through the brain, producing that. My point is that you control that. You control the direction and the directionality and the outcome, because every time you think, feel, and choose, which you are doing at these massive speeds, every choice that you make collapses the waves. If you know anything about quantum physics, you may have heard about the observer effect, where the observer observes, and as they observe, the waves turn into particles and the wave collapses. In very simple language is that we make decisions, and our decisions are literally like a wave. So think of a wave in the sea, and think of a wave that's building. So as you think, feel, and choose, that is the wave building. As the wave is building, you thinking, feeling, choosing, and as the wave is crashing, that is the choice. In the brain, that looks like an electrical chemical reaction and a genetic reaction. So what we do is we actually then cause a genetic change. We make amino acids, we make proteins, and specifically in the brain, we find in the dendrites that we build this information that we've collapsed as a wave into vibrations in tubulin, which is a protein inside microtubules inside dendrites. So let me show you a plant. This is a neuron. It's a plant, but they pretty much look like neurons. They have this arbor-like structure, and it's just an easy way of understanding the little branches that are growing are the dendrites, and then obviously the trunk would be the axon, and that just gives you a good analogy. So this would be a healthy thought, where you thought, felt, and chosen, and you've responded in a way that's healthy. And healthy means also crying. It means acknowledging the depression. It means acknowledging the pain. We often think healthy thoughts are only happy thoughts. Healthy thoughts are saying, I feel totally burnt out because I cannot handle being on a constant traumatic state all the time, where I'm absorbing all this pain of my patients, and you've pushed it down. If you suppress it, it's still there. So it becomes toxic. So whereas if I deal with it, it's actually a healthy thought. But if every time you experience something toxic, like a trauma or whatever, and you just shove it down, it becomes toxic. So I use this wiry tree to show that even if you have a toxic reaction, which is a disconnection or a trauma that you're not processing, or a toxic habit you haven't dealt with, or a pattern you've got into where you're not dealing with stuff, you're still going to build the thought, you're still going to grow the dendrites, but it's toxic. So the proteins fold incorrectly, the vibrations are incorrect, it upsets the electrical chemical balance. And so what we see in the research, that the most recent research that I've done, is we see a significant correlation between, very, very significant correlation between how we are managing our mind and the impact on our immune system. Now, that's nothing new. We all know that. But there is more and more research bringing that up, and that's one of the elements I looked at. And we know that the immune system is driven by cortisol. I looked at a lot of other different factors too. I looked at homocysteine, I looked at prolactin, I looked at a lot of different factors. I looked at the telomeres as well. And just to give you a broad understanding, is we saw a significant increase in cortisol and decrease in immune function, increase in homocysteine and decrease in immune function, as in the control group that did not have any mind management. The experimental group that went through the mind management, we saw the opposite: significant reduction in cortisol, significant improvement in immune system, significant reduction in homocysteine, significant improvement in immune system. And that happened over a period of 63 days. And I'll tell you about that timing in a moment. I've got some images. So the point here is that there is, what we do with our mind is going to change the structure of our brain. It is, whether you like it or not. Right now, you've changed the structure of your brain totally just by listening to me. You're always changing your brain. You're always updating your wave. You're always getting new things. So you're always changing your brain. So my point is that if we're always changing our brain, let's learn how to manage that change. So how do we manage that change? We have to manage our thinking, feeling, and choosing. So therefore, we have to manage our mind. So if we look at the next slide, okay, we're going to see neurons in a petri dish, and this is just to show you a little bit of a understanding of how, when we think, feel, and choose, we grow. This just shows you neuroplasticity. It shows you neurogenesis. It's showing you basically that, and this is what's happening. Obviously, it's slowed down dramatically, but this is what we see happening in the brain. As you think, feel, and choose, you're growing structures in your brain. Thoughts are real. They occupy mental real estate. So a thought is what you grow as a result of thinking, feeling, and choosing. So mind in action, thinking, feeling, choosing, you're going to grow thoughts. So when I hold these things up, that's what they really look like. So that image is the analogy to help you. But these are real. I want you to get the concept that these are real thoughts. So what the great news is with neuroplasticity, and that I've showed in my research, is that we grow thoughts, whether you like it or not, you're growing them, but you can also ungrow them. You can get rid of them. A thought stays alive like a plant stays alive. We give it water, we give it nutrition. So we have to feed a thought to keep it alive. And how do we feed it? As you keep thinking about it. So as you keep thinking about something, you're giving it the energy to keep it alive. So if we go to the next slide, you're going to see, let's get the next one up. Okay, it's coming. So here we're going to see a very old slide, a very traditional slide. This is basically showing the glial cells, showing neurons, and it's showing the tree-like structure, the arbor-like structure, just to get that analogy in your mind once again. And this is Raymond Kayal's slide, and it just shows the neuron trees inside the brain. So these are thoughts. The thoughts, we used to think thoughts were stored in the connections between the synapses, but they don't last long enough. So short-term memory is at the connections between synapses. Long-term memory and which is inside thoughts, are stored in the dendrites. So initially, as you hear stuff, you get activation in the cell body and in the connections in synapses, but then it goes, as the more you think about it, the more you feed it, the more then it goes into the dendrites, and you grow it into dendrites, and you grow make these little microcomputers, these supercomputers, neurobiological supercomputers that hold the vibrations, but they can always be changed. So if we don't feed it, if we actually remove the energy is never lost. Energy is always transferred. So when we change how we think, feel, and choose, then we actually can remove the energy from the toxic thoughts. And if a toxic thought doesn't have energy, it will denature. The proteins that it's made of will denature. So when we talk about wiring out toxicity, wiring out trauma, and building in healthy new thought patterns, this is something that we do with our mind, and there's a physical result. So the mind-brain connection and body connection. With our subjects in our experimental group, we saw a significant change in telomere length, which has a lot to do with cell health and biological age, with mind management. We saw a significant decrease in telomere length in the control group that didn't have mind management, and over short periods of time. Dr. Eppel, Professor Eppel at UC San Francisco, she's won the Nobel Prize on her work on telomeres. She has shown that in as short as 9 to 12 weeks, you can change the telomere length, because we used to think changes only happen over 5 years and then every 4 months, etc. But we saw in our study, we saw these changes happening in as short as 9 weeks. So that's evidence that when we change our mind, we're going to change our chemicals. That's why I mentioned cortisol and homocysteine. We're going to change our telomeres. We're going to change cell health. We're going to change cognitive and emotional functioning. So your ability to socialize, etc. All those behavior patterns will change through mind management. So let's talk now about let's look at the next slide. I want to just talk about what mind is. So we've defined mind. Let's go to the slide on the, I'm going to show you my theory. It's going to jump through a few slides. I just want to show you my theory. We're going to come back to these brain slides in a moment, but mind is divided into, we're going to come back to all these slides now. Just ignore those for now. Mind is divided into the conscious mind, the non-conscious mind. Just trying to find this slide. Okay, sorry guys, I don't have the slide that I'm looking for here. Never mind. Okay, so let's just go to this one here. The mind is, can you all see the slide? Okay, let's just put this full screen. Mind, I'm going to explain the slide in a moment. Mind is divided into the conscious mind. The conscious mind is around about 10% of mind. It's when you're awake. Your brain functions differently, the chemicals function differently, your prefrontal cortex functions differently, etc. So we see when people are awake, when we use, for example, a QEEG, we will see all the different waves, delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma, all flowing in a very active way. Like we have waves in the sea, the energy of the brain flows in these waves that we can pick up with these frequencies. If you think of the sea towards the middle, you've got huge swells. That represents our delta. Delta is very important in terms of sleep. We all know that, but it's very important in terms of the memories that are in your non-conscious mind. Then you have theta, which is coming in a little bit closer. So it's not as the waves, the swells are not as massive and deep. They're getting a little bit smaller. And then we get, and that's also very much part of how our ability to insight. When we have a lot of insight and awareness into our issues, we get a lot of theta and delta activity. So theta and delta do have a lot to do with sleep, but they have a huge amount to do with insight, awareness, finding the toxic patterns, changing the toxic patterns, rebuilding toxic patterns. So what we see, for example, with our experimental group is that when we taught them mind management, they would build very strong networks of coping networks that when they're in a situation, they've literally got a mind hack, and we would have the correct amount of alpha and delta, theta and delta flowing to enable them to function parasympathetic and sympathetic. Sarah said in the beginning, she explained so well, that when your sympathetic takes over, your parasympathetic will reduce. Nothing ever switches off, but you've got an imbalance in the seesaw. You want to get a balance again. So what we see with mind management is you can bring that balance back. You can actually build networks into the non-conscious mind, which then makes delta and theta much more active, which means that you can get your hands on those patterns of high cognitive flexibility that you need in a time of crisis, and that you need in order to help you cope with the tragedy of racism, or you need to cope with the tragedy of a major illness, or going from one tragedy to the next, or one toxic demanding, challenging situation to the next in your work. You need to have these coping networks that you can build into your brain. So all my work is around teaching people how to build these into these networks. The other wave is as you move closer in, and the wave builds, that's called alpha. And alpha is the ability to calm your mind down enough, your brain down enough, that you can access this information. So when our sympathetic dominates, alpha just drops and you can't get access to insight and awareness. So we want to increase our alpha bridge. So we want to be able to automatically do that in a demanding situation. So we want to be able to get alpha active inside the emergency room, and we want it at home as well. We want to be able to function normally in our relationships. So the mind management techniques I've developed work on building this relationship. Then you have beta and gamma. And beta is low beta, high beta is when you're online. So very active when you're awake and conscious, but beta is kind of keeping you online and processing. High beta is to keep you paying attention. So, but high beta needs to work in a cycle. So beta can be seen as the wave building and crashing onto the beach. And then gamma can be the little ripples along the beach. So that's just your kind of analogy. Now, what we want is this constant flow, the building, the wave, the crashing, and then going back into the sea. We want this constant cycle. Mind management enables that constant cycle, so that when you're in a situation where it's traumatic and you've got to empathize with a patient, empathize with someone who's had an experience or trying to process what George Floyd went through, we want to be able to freak out in the love zone. You want that wave cycle happening so that you can have calmness and insight and access wisdom. Because what we see in the non-conscious mind, which is the biggest part of your mind, we see the wisdom. So the conscious mind is the smallest part of our mind. It's around 10%, and that is only awake when we're awake. Your non-conscious mind is the 90 to 99% of who you are, and it's awake 24/7. And what we want is a good interaction between the non-conscious and the conscious mind. The subconscious mind is between the non-conscious, the giant 24/7 quantum, huge, infinite, non-physical, massive part of us. The conscious is only operating when we are awake, and it's much slower. But it's in the conscious mind that we make the changes. We can only make changes when we bring things from the non-conscious to the conscious awareness. So we have to bring, for example, racial prejudice that we don't even realize we've got, from the non-conscious to the conscious, to rewire it, to rebuild these things. We want to take these non-conscious coping mechanisms that are damaging us from the non-conscious to the conscious, and we want to rewire those. So all my techniques are designed to help you find these non-conscious toxic thoughts and bring them to the conscious mind and do the work of mind management, and then push them back into the non-conscious mind, wired into the healthy format, so that you can draw on those in the time of crisis and help to balance family, home, etc., compartmentalize all that kind of stuff. The subconscious is between the two. So the subconscious is that you're almost aware, and the non-conscious works on energy. This builds up toxic energy. You know, when you go running and you build up, you get a knot in your leg, you twist your muscle or something, you get a buildup of lactic acid, that you've got to then walk it out to take the pain away. Same thing. This creates a toxic energy. It's toxic. Your brain, you are wired for love. You literally, Nobel Prize winners have indicated that we are wired for love, which means our brain, our neurons, our circuits. We don't have fear circuits. This is misinformation. The amygdala is not a fear organ. It is an emotional, it's an organ that is designed to respond to our emotional perceptions. But we can, part of the thoughts that we build, if we build a toxic thought like this, we have a toxic emotional perception. It's like a library, but that's not our natural functioning. This toxicity, it goes against our natural functioning. So therefore, the non-conscious mind picks up this mix up of energy, and it's disruptive to the physiology and to the neurology. So therefore it sends messages into the subconscious and trying to get your attention, and that is depression, anxiety, compassion fatigue, burnout, OCD, intrusive thoughts, all these things. Those are messages. The stress reactions in our body, the cardiovascular issues, all the physical functioning, these all work together. And obviously there's other causes of physiological things as well. But in general, I'm talking now with this, our body, because our brain and mind works, our mind works through our brain and body, obviously our brain and body experience the trauma, and it will, constant worrying, constant trauma will cause cardiovascular issues or immune issues or GI issues, or et cetera, et cetera. So we do have to use biomedical intervention to deal with the result of our thinking. But if we don't deal with our mind, we're putting a band-aid on the wound and it's going to keep coming back. So we have to address the biomedical, the physical, but we have to also address the mind. So the subconscious, the non-conscious sends prompts as emotional and physical warning signals for us to, hey, pay attention, something's going on, we need to pay attention. And then we can start changing that. So let me show you quickly some brain style, these are head maps using QEEGs from our most recent study, what I want to hone in on. And then I know Sarah's got some more specific questions where we can dive in deeper. And I apologize if this is a lot of information. It's a ton. This is just to give you an awareness of what's going on. But here, this will kind of pull it together. Actually, you know what's going to make it easier is if I actually talk about this slide first. Over the period of 1991 and 1993, I did work with a lot of traumatic brain injured patients and a lot of very severe learning disabled patients with and also cognitively impaired. So this is a summary graph. And what I looked at as well is there a trend in an organization for change to happen in a school or an environment? And is there a natural trend? Do we change? And there is a little shift. If you look between 91 and 92, you'll see a little shift. So we do change. As humans, we do change. But if we don't manage our mind, the change drops back. So what the first two graphs, what we can see happening is if we don't manage our mind, we just kind of stay in the same place. We just don't grow forward. And I think that's what's happened I know that's what's happened in society in terms of racism. That's what's happening in the medical, in the medical world at the moment. And in life, we are not moving forward because we're trying to just do the preparation and the stage 5. We have to also do the mind management, which are the 5 steps, basically the 5 steps in between. So when you introduce mind management, when you start getting all those waves going and you start learning how to manage your thinking, feeling, and choosing and directing your learning and building your brain, which is all stuff you can learn. It's all stuff that's actually quite easy to do. I even have developed 5-step hacks that you can memorize and use in emergency situations. When you do that, you will have a massive shift in functioning. So this particular group of studies showed a 35 to 75% improvement in people's cognitive, emotional, social, and intellectual functioning once you introduce mind management. So I altered the trend in multiple organizations and dealing with these traumatic issues. And not I introduced the technique. The people that used it, if you don't use it, it's not going to work for you. That was very clear. The subjects that didn't use it didn't benefit. The subjects that used it for the amount of time and kept using it, you can't just use this one-off. This is a lifestyle that I teach. This is what you do every day. This is not a now and then I just do one treatment and it's over. This is a lifestyle. Mind management, you always have your mind. Your mind is always with you. It always needs management. So now we look at these head maps and you'll see day 1, 21, and 63. You've all heard habits form in 21 days. Nonsense. They do not form in 21 days. It's impossible. So I've been trying to research this for 38 years too. Neuroplasticity has everything to do with your brain changing because your mind is changing your brain in all the things I've been saying. And there's a very definite time frame. And this is very important for sustainability and moving forward. So these subjects, let me first explain the numbers. So when you start mind management, when you start changing your mind at day 1, it's going to take at least 3 weeks for you to have altered the thought enough that you start feeling change. So you're starting to build it into long-term memory. But it's going to take a full 63 days, more or less. So about 9 weeks before you have sustainable change. So for you to experience the kind of changes that you need to help you manage in your environment, and they would have to be broken down into all the different elements, like literally the different thoughts that we need to work on, you're going to have to work at these over 63 days. The good news is that you feel the difference immediately. You feel a massive difference at day 4, day 7, day 21, day 42, day 63. These very clear markers, which is very encouraging if you know what to look for. So this particular patient, that subject that came in was very depressed, couldn't sleep. Totally, the relationships were breaking down. Their work they were almost non-functional at work. It was extremely bad. That is shown. I'm just going to talk about very simplistically about like a few of the colors here. Blue, when we see a blue brain, this is a depressed brain. This is someone who's low. All their waves are not doing what they should. They're not getting the ripples. They're not getting the wave buildup. Things are very suppressed. The energy is very, very low. And that there's like no connection, insight into the depths of the non-conscious. Our non-conscious is filled with wisdom. Quantum physics tells us that quantum physics is the science of thought. That's literally what it's called. It's the science of thought. So when you use quantum physics to understand this kind of stuff, it's really good, because what we see is that we are actually made of waves of love energy. So when we're in this depressed state, we can't access the wisdom that is in our non-conscious mind and in our body. And that may sound woo-woo stuff, but quantum physics is the most accurate and fundamental of sciences and has shown this scientifically. So what I'm saying is hardcore science. So the science of thought tells us that at our most fundamental level, these waves of energy need to flow in a certain way. And when we constantly have toxic thinking or not managing our minds just through the pressure of work, then we will get this flat line kind of thing happening, and I'll show you another case in a moment of where you get too much anxiety. Okay, so we put the subject into mind management. It's in my app. I'm going to show you an image of my app. I've put all my programs now into technology platforms, and I've got an app called Switch, which is what we used in this particular study. We'll put the link up for you afterwards. But basically, this is what the app is. This is what the subjects went through. They did not have direct training from me. This was a double-blind, random controlled study, gold standard. We did it as a single subject design as well as a random control study design. And this subject, by day 21, that gray brain shows that that their brain is normalizing. They were sleeping. They were still battling with sleep. They were still battling with depression. They're not going to go away. That depression, we're all going to experience depression and anxiety, but there was management of it. They were starting to get insight into the depths of their non-conscious to find out why were they so depressed? Why weren't they sleeping? And they started identifying the thought. So here, a thought is filled with memories. So this is one of the last things I want to teach you is a thought is not the same as a memory. A thought is the concept, and a thought is built up of memories related to the concept. So here we talk about you are feeling totally burnt out, or racism. That's the concept, but then there's your unique experiences, all your memories. And every thought has the information and the emotions. And there is that on a non-physical level and a physical level. Physically, the information is a vibration in a protein, and emotionally, it's chemicals. And it's the combination. There's a whole quantum physics combination there. So then there's a physical for the emotional and the informational. So a thought is the big concept, and a thought has information and emotions. Okay. And so when we start unpacking and unwiring, we're going to start identifying all the little memories inside the thought. So you work on one thought and you work out all those memories. Okay. So when the subject did this, by day 21, the depression had lifted. They were managing the depression. The frontal lobe there, you see some green. There's still a problem with how they see themselves, how they still calling themselves a depressed person because they've been labeled for so long. So there's still an identity issue. But the point is here that this is unreal. This subject's depression literally had been managed. By day 63, it was sustained. And we did another follow-up study 3 months later. So over a total of 6 months, even better. So then very quickly, I'll show you another slide. Let me give you this one here. I want to show you now. Have a look. This is now a control group patient. Very, very anxious, very worked up, very on edge. Both of these, by the way, were millennials. And if you see the bottom right, I think it's showing that are you seeing, my screen is covered. Are you seeing, yes, okay. Can you see day 63, look at the last brain, the last head. And if you just to orientate yourself, the nose is the little thing pointing at the front and the ears are at the side, just to orientate you. So here now we see a subject who came in who is showing a lot of suppression. So day 1, you see a lot of green and yellow. That is showing us that there is tremendous amount of suppressed issues. This particular subject is one of these, was buzzing and like doing everything to distract and not focus on the issue at hand. Alpha is very blue, which means that the gate is closed. So this subject has got no insight and is not looking inward and is actually refusing to look inward and is just keeping themselves busy as a distraction. Okay, so no training, but they went through all the analysis processes, so it made them very aware. So what I did with these subjects in the control group is I made them aware that something was going on. I literally forced them to become aware through the psychological profiles, various different psychological profiles and the blood work and et cetera, but they had no mind management and they got worse. The red that you see in day one at beta and alpha and high beta, way too much. That shows way too much on being in a constant, that wave just, it's like a tsunami. It's gone into a White River Rapids.
Slide disappeared.
By day 63, this subject couldn't get away from the fact that they now know they've got issues, but they didn't know what to do with it. So they had a complete red brain. I have to tell you, we did give them the app after the study and they did get mind management, but they got worse and worse and worse. And that red brain is very significant of what compassion fatigue literally looks like in the brain and physician burnout. And this is high anxiety and a brain on complete and utter overdrive, but it can be changed through mind management. Okay, I'm going to stop there, otherwise I'll never stop talking. And I know that Sarah's got lots of questions that maybe can unpack some of what I've said. Thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
I can't hear you now.
I think Sarah can hear you now.
What's happening here?
She can hear.
Okay. And Dr.
I'm
Lee,
not
could just, that last slide I don't think was on presentation
Sorry,
view.
I can't hear you. Let's see what's going on.
Onto video.
Can you hear us, Gals Lit Brunch?
I think I'm still muted. I
Okay.
can't hear you.
We can
So
hear,
I've unmuted my side.
that's okay. We'll give you just a minute. So as we're ready to transition
on
here in
here?
just a minute, this is the time where you can start getting your questions in the chat box while they're working.
Okay, I've just unplugged my earphones and now the sound's coming through. There must have been something going on there. Okay, so I can hear you now. Can you all hear me?
Yay! Okay. Technology is always.
Oh gosh, honestly.
We weren't able to actually see that
One of the
last
buckets,
slide.
yeah.
So if it's possible for us
Trying to
to,
figure how to get out of this Zoom call.
I can try and I can share it again. Okay, can you see it now? It says I'm screen sharing.
yes, we can see it again. That is beautiful. So,
Okay, so do you want me to walk you through that again quickly?
yes, please.
Okay, so day one, this is a control subject. At delta where you see the green and yellow, that is showing suppression, memory suppression, which I picked up with a scale as well that I've developed. That is a questionnaire that can be done that matches directly with what's going on in your unconscious brain. So not everyone can do a QEEG, but the scale that I've developed picks up the same results as the QEEG, which is very interesting. So that's very nice for in the medical. And just as an aside, I didn't say this earlier, but I have a scale that's validated, scientific, researched, that is able to help you understand the level of awareness and the level of trauma that your brain is in, which is really nice to know. So the blue in alpha there shows that they've completely blocked. The alpha bridge is closed, the door is closed. So they don't have insight and awareness into what's driving them. They are living in a perpetual, almost like if you think of summertime, how you're always buzzing and going, and wintertime is a bit more slow. This person is living in a perpetual summer, on a go, which I think you can all identify with. And then by day 21, with all its control, so they were doing all the scales, all the physiological, the blood work, the neurophysiological testing, but they had no mind management. So they were aware, because all the scales, especially the one I've developed, will increase it starts you looking. So there is a bit of dark green in the alpha. So we see that the bridge is starting to open and they're starting to get a bit of insight, which is why we see some activity in the theta, where there's now insight starting to happen. They're starting to see, there is stuff going on here. But they don't have a management, so we see what we call multiple foci of the high beta, bursts of high beta, and their gamma as well. I don't have the gamma on here, but the gamma was like a whoosh, and you don't want whooshes of gamma, you want a flow. Okay, everything you want flowing, the energy needs to flow like a wave. By day 63, with even more increased awareness, there's more alpha bridge waking up, so there's more green there, and we can now see that the theta and that the unconscious mind, they are looking inside, they're getting insight, but they have now they're totally stymied. I know that this is a mess. I know my life's a mess. I don't know what to do. And that's where we see the increase in high beta red brain. This is, I mean, this particular person, their biological age was almost 20 years older than their chronological age. Their telomeres had shortened so much. So that's what that slide. Okay, so
that's amazing. Thank you so much. We're capturing this for recording to send to our frontline providers that are out in the field right now. So thanks for taking a minute for that.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. So we can come out of the screen share view now, and then Tiffany's going to take a break for cheers, and then we'll get Q&A going.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was revelatory. I think all of us are just reassessing how we view every part of our lives right now. So thank you for going into that. Let you take over whenever you're ready. So we'll do, we're going to put resources in your hands when this is over, and then we'll have some contact as well.
Yeah, so we're going to do a quick cheers break. Woot woot. And we're going to ask Dr. Leaf to pose, and everyone get your phones out, take a picture of it, and post it on your social media. Tag Dr. Caroline Leaf. It's exactly at Dr. Caroline Leaf and at Gals at Brunch, and we're going to do a giveaway. And so we're going to hand out a couple of t-shirts and tote bags and whatnot, and we'll let you guys know who the winners are after the Q&A portion. So if you want to go on to speaker view, and you can get a picture of the screen, or I guess because we're talking, but yeah, you can take a picture of it and share it, and we'll let the winner know after the Q&A.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So much fun.
Great.
Okay, so you've kind of already touched on all of these a little bit already broadly, but I want to bring back the focus so we're all clear on how to actually apply this. I think one of the concerns that keeps coming up from people in the medical community and public service is you've talked about these bite-sized steps and that there needs to be a flow of process. But for somebody who is kind of already in over their head in the trauma that they've seen and feels like if they even begin to open the lid of processing what's going on, that they would drown in emotions or that they wouldn't be able to be functional anymore and go back to work the next day. What would you say to them in starting out this process?
Well, the first thing is to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. So definitely you need to sort of what would be ideal is to, and then from ideal we go to what's real, is to actually carve out a time where you can maybe take a weekend, where you can start, because you can over a weekend, you can unpack so much in a 24-hour period, that if you can take a weekend where you can start saying, okay, I'm going to start working on this, because it's we can't heal until we feel. And so we have to get it out. We have to go through the pain first. And in the pain is the nuggets. And I know we all talk about this all the time, but it seriously is the case. Like that particular subject, the last one I showed you, once we gave her, after the research was done, after the trial was over, and she got the app, she was then able to have a way of dealing with that pain. But you've got to look at she's an example of someone denying their pain. So we have to face that first. So it's to try and carve out a time where you can safely, and I would do this with like a really good friend or a loved one, that you don't do it alone, because it's not just you, everyone's going through something. This is what we've got to realize. I know there's a lot of, I've trained so many physicians in my life and trained at so many medical schools. And one of the things that is huge, and I work with a team of doctors, my team that does the research with me, like neurosurgeons and neuroscientists, there's a lot of stigma, as you guys know, around admitting that you have battling with your mind. Meanwhile, that is because of this current model that says if you feel depressed, there's something clinically wrong with you. Now your job is threatened. And then, one physician a day is committing suicide, and it's just like you nurses have just got to keep everything together. And so what we need to do is is on the other side is we've got to start making it acceptable to say, I do not feel like I'm coping, and that is okay. We've got to tell ourselves it's not a shame thing. Shame says, oh, I'm bad, I'm useless, I'm weak. Guilt is more motivational. Oh, that behavior, keep snapping at my kids. Okay, that's not, I feel guilty for that, but why am I snapping? Because I'm absolutely worn out and exhausted. Why am I worn out and exhausted? Because I'm carrying this trauma. So we need to do that work. And that's what my system teaches, is how do I go through this in a very comfortable way? So it's 5 steps. So maybe, do you want me to walk you through kind of the basic overview? Would that help?
Yes.
Okay. So we always prepare, and this is where like meditation and breathing and tapping and whatever you want to do, and as long as you want to do it, is very good, because you just want to get your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system to a point where you calm. I love the Wim Hof method. I don't know if you know the Iceman, Wim Hof. You don't have to use that, but I mean, I'm biased towards his method because it's very effective in terms of teaching you how to get mind over body control very, very fast. There's exercises like that the Navy SEALs use, which is the box method of counting. So in 4, hold 4, out 4, hold 4. So in other words, get a handle on a couple of preparation breathing techniques. If you can't do anything, get into very rhythmic breathing. Think of the waves of the sea, but that's important preparation. Meditation, the research shows meditation changes, and you've all been told about this, but meditation has a very big downside that no one talks about, and that is that it isn't sustainable, and can also bring awareness and create a red brain, because you're now aware of stuff and now you don't know what to do with it. And so that's why immediately with breathing, you can do some meditation, but you can do meditation how you are comfortable. I'm not going to give you a formula, do it in the way that you are comfortable, but you can also immediately follow with something like tapping or acupressure or something like that if you're feeling your body getting out of control. So those are kind of the very simple summary of preparation. That's generally where most of the techniques end. That's considered stress management. Obviously, we need to address diet and exercise. We all know that. And eating healthy and whatever. I'm not even going to go down there. There's just so much information. I have tons on my website. Let's talk about mind management, which is what's neglected. So once I've done my preparation, we need to go through 5 steps. And those 5 steps are so simple, but have so much neurophysiology and so much research behind them that I don't want you to not hear what I'm saying. I want you to hear the research I've just told you and understand this comes on really very deep research on how the brain works. So the first step is that you have to start listening to the message from the non-conscious mind. You've got to start tuning in to the subconscious mind. Non-conscious, that biggest 24/7 part of you, the 24/7 active biggest part of you. The subconscious is between, and the conscious is when you're awake. Unconscious is when you have an anesthetic or you knocked out on the head. So people misuse the word unconscious. It's actually non-conscious. That's the correct scientific word. That's where your thoughts with their memories, your emotions, your belief systems, your wisdom. And let me tell you a little hint here with this first step. Your awareness and the pain of your awareness, your body has got enough, your non-conscious mind and your body have enough wisdom that you know what you can handle. So you can give yourself permission to what I call freak out in the love zone. It's okay to scream, to shout, to swear, and to have a breakdown. You need to give yourself permission to do that. If you don't get it out, it's going to go into your body. It's going to go into your telomeres. It's going to go into your, blood is not a measure of mental health, but blood, because it's too variable, and you've got to look at it over time. But there are definitely correlations, as we know. And it's also, once again, over time, cortisol can change AM, PM, it can change. So in other words, what I'm saying is that we need to give ourselves permission to experience and say those things. And yes, you may feel your HPA axis going crazy in the moment, and you may feel guilt or whatever, but you've got to get it out. A lot of medical people are in, I'm bad if I can't control my emotions. You're not bad at all. And we've got to distinguish that I'm bad from maybe I'm doing some bad behaviors, like maybe I'm not as efficient as I could be, or maybe I'm acting, I'm denying this burnout. So that's all around the first step. So the first step is this awareness that I'm not coping, awareness that it's okay that I'm not coping, awareness that I feel like just crying, awareness that I want to tell you I am depressed. I want to tell you I feel so anxious. I want to tell you I hate the fact that I can't be whatever. That is okay. You've got to start with that awareness. And that is step 1. And I'm going to give you the steps broadly, and then I'll go into a little bit more specifically. Step 2 is then when you do that awareness, you're starting to bring this issue up. Now, this thought could have millions of memories inside, hundreds of thousands. So as you become aware, you're not going to solve it the first day. There's just this big whoosh of awareness, which is very hard to unpack. So we need to start reflecting on this. So what are on these branches? What is the detail? And so reflection, the second step is to start, why do I feel like this? And there's the most obvious stuff will come out. I'm overworked, I'm tired, the system, all the things that we know, the things that need to change in the system, and then you'll get down to deeper and deeper stuff. And as you reflect, you go to the third step, because as you're reflecting, your brain is already making a lot of genetic changes. So you want to capture that and write that down, because then you direct the process. So writing has a massive impact on how you unwire these things and rewire them. And it affects if the basal ganglia gets activated, you create a strong connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and etc. You really want to get a lot of activity there. So that writing down goes hand in hand with the reflection. So that's the third step. The fourth step is then you look at what you have written. It's eye-opening, because you're putting your brain on paper. The writing's not supposed to be this nice, neat little thing. It's pour your brain on paper. Get that thought out, messy, ugly, and there's different techniques that you can use. One of the ones that is very powerful is called a metacog, which is, you can see this in my work. It's basically a way of organizing thoughts that look like a tree. And it's much more multidimensional. So it's much closer to, so you can get to the core of issues. That's how I would get to the core of issues very, very fast. Like if you work with someone who is battling with, like, I hate to use the word schizophrenia, because it's not an it, but someone who's so broken in their mind that their mind is starting to split. That this using a metacog was one of the strongest ways we could actually show, hey, this is your thinking and that's your thinking, and they think it's the same person and they see it visually. So it's very visual. It shows you what's going on in the depths. It draws on the theta wave in the brain, which is a very healing wave. So lots of physiology. I don't want to overwhelm you, but the third step of writing is a fourth step where you recheck what you've written is going to start giving you insight into what's going on in your brain. The fourth step is an autopsy. Think of medical terms. You're doing a mental autopsy. The autopsy is kind of all the way through, but you're now really getting into the autopsy where you're trying to see, okay, what's going on? What's the main, there's 10 issues going on here. And what's the one that's coming up the most? And what's the one that I can actually now deal with now? What's the most simple of these that I can actually deal with now? And from there, you go to the fifth step, which is an active reach. What can I do now? Now, this process of 5 steps, you do in 7 to 15 minutes. In the morning before you go to work. So you don't do this longer for emotional stuff. You do the 5 steps longer for brain building, which is another whole concept of building resilience. But for finding and detoxing and rebuilding a healthy thought, you're going to spend 7 to 15 minutes, which means about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes on each of the 5 steps. So you don't solve it today, but you only handle what you can handle today. We do too much at once, and that totally overwhelms us. So we bring this up, we do the work, we put it back down. And one of your questions that's coming up is compartmentalization. This is healthy compartmentalization, where I acknowledge I wake up in the morning and I don't know if I can get through the day. There's just too much. So I do my 5 steps and I compartmentalize, and now I shift into mode where I can actually move forward, because I haven't stuffed that down. I've acknowledged it. Stuffing it down and thinking I've just got to keep going, red brain. But by pulling it up, I'm now starting to drop the red brain and get more of a balance and get my brain more gray. It's not really gray, but I'm just using, that's what we see on the QEEG. So that you do, so then you do it the next day and the next day. And after 21 days, each day there's another little bit of revelation. After 21 days, we see massive gamma peaks in the brain where we see neuroplasticity happening. So we see very strong unwiring and rewiring. Now, the rewiring doesn't mean I forget the trauma or forget the previous. It means that I've got a new way of functioning. So I'm rewiring. I'm taking the energy away from the watered plant that gets no more water, and I'm transferring the energy to a newly reconceptualized memory. Okay. And by you keep doing it, you keep working through the process. By day 63, you would have built a coping new network into the brain, which is, it takes 63 days to get it into the non-conscious, that when you're in the crisis, instead of just sympathetic, you can have sympathetic and parasympathetic balance, which enables alpha bridge to increase, which means I can draw this up. If I don't draw it up, if I don't get that balance, I can't draw this up. And if I've only done it for 3 days, it's not strong enough. It's just there. It's going to die. It takes 21 days to grow this, and then it'll just sit there. The other 42 days makes it accessible. And this is what gets pushed into your subconscious and prompts you. And you can become an expert at drawing on those. So you build these coping mechanisms. I mean, that's a very quick walk through, but that is essentially the process that I teach people. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's amazing. It does. And is this separate from the 5-step hack you said? I'm assuming it's different from in the middle of an emergency.
Yes. So what you do is the 5-step. So you're working on, yes. Okay. Let me answer it like this. I've just finished a new book where I've put the 5-step hacks in because of the need for people to have hacks. So it's basically like, what do I do in certain emergency situations? So I've given lots of examples in my book, but an example would be, okay, I'm doing a code blue. I've got to keep my sympathetic and my parasympathetic up. So I've got cognitive flexibility. Going through the 63 days, I'm going to build in and wire in a new network. So a hack would be doing it like quickly. So instead of doing it over 63 days, you would work out what those 5 steps are. You would do them in the moment, and you would still have to practice them over 63 days, but you could have them while you're still practicing them. You could have them on your phone. You could have those steps on your phone. You could have them somewhere. So a hack is being proactive in knowing these are the situations that I encounter at work, and I think these are the best ways of handling those, and then using them, but then doing the work afterwards to actually go through the full 63 days to see if those are the best hacks. Right. So does that make sense? So you work out a short-term solution that is following through the 5 steps, and you get so good. Like training this, obviously I've done this. I can do a 5-step in an emergency situation. I had an emergency situation at 3:00 this morning with one of my children, and who was very, very ill, and I had to keep myself focused. Otherwise I'm going to fall apart as a mother and be useless. So I did a 5-step hack. So I'm so used to capturing what would have blocked me from being efficient would have been the emotions overwhelming. So I had to be aware of what was going on in myself, quickly go through the 5 steps, and the active reach was basically, now I'm calm enough to actually listen and stay calm, to keep her calm, to get her through the situation. So that's what I mean by a 5-step hack. So what you do, you live a lifestyle daily mind management plan, which is part of the training that I do. Is you every day you are doing a 7 to 15 minute detox on something, because we're always for the rest of our life working on something. By doing that for 7 minutes when you're getting ready, you train yourself in the process. Then the hacks become the things you do during the course of the day. So it's for the chronic recurrent stuff. So you have your long-term plan, and then you have your recurrent stuff, and the two bleed into each other or facilitate each other. In addition to that, we've got to build our brain. That's something that we've neglected. It's the biggest part of mental health that we have neglected. Is resilience comes from building our brain, and that is using the 5 steps to learn new information. And so, just learning about this content is resilience training. So you can allocate an hour of time to study how to do this, and that'll build your brain. Or you can study anything, something related to your work, but building your brain is incredibly important. So with my patients, for example, they'd come in, I would do identity work first, and then I would do resilience training first, and then I would do emotional work. Always. And I didn't do that by accident. It was purely through the research, because I immediately, with my subjects, my automatic thing was, let's get the emotions settled and then we can do the work. Wrong way around. Let's actually, let's get the breathing, whatever, let's calm ourselves down. Let's distract, but constructive distraction. Let me learn something, and then let me then deal with the emotional. So for example, the crisis that happened this morning, guess what I did to calm myself down while I was doing this whole helping my daughter? I was taking the articles that you sent me, Sarah, and I was using the 5 steps, because the stuff fascinates me. Any intellectual thing grabs me. So I built resilience, and I was reading through them using the 5 steps, and then I was able to also emotionally manage the situation. And that sounds like a lot of juggling, but it wasn't, because I'm so trained in it now. And it was so easy. As I had little pauses between my daughter going to the bathroom because she was really, really ill, I would quickly do a 5-step brain building. Then she'd come back on. You see what I'm saying? It's a lifestyle. So it's become, I manage my mind.
Yeah. So it sounds like you prepare before the emergency, practice in the middle of the emergency, and evaluate after the emergency.
Exactly. But we need to train. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it. And you get better and better at it all the time. And then you build up your own toolbox of hacks that you can use on the spot. So that's essentially what I would build into
That's beautiful. That is so helpful. Thank you so much. So we're running a little bit out of time, but we are going to capture your questions and take a look at them. So we're not ignoring them, but there's one question that I feel like is very important that I would love to hear your insights on, and then we'll talk about how we can put this into action in our own systems. One of the things that kept coming up in the research, and I think this has even come up in your own, on the need for deep connection and the ability to process with your loved ones. In your community. A lot of people in public service work are afraid that if they share their experiences with their families, that it will be too damaging. And so they either keep it inside and ignore, or they will only share with other frontline workers who may be burnt out and further contribute to a culture of cynicism. What advice would you give for people to be able to connect and process with their loved ones without traumatizing them?
Okay, it's such a brilliant question. I'm so thrilled you asked that. First of all, these are volcanic in nature. They cannot be suppressed. So you may think you're suppressing them, but they're there and they will explode. They will explode in your body physically, they will explode in your mind mentally, they will explode in your relationship. So you may think that you are hiding stuff, but you're not. So it's way better to decompress with your family and you certain family members. You'll be amazed at how, if you've got teenage kids, if you've got kids are incredible to decompress. So you don't have to give all the gory detail, but it is very healthy to sit down and say, I feel, if you've got a young child, mom's exhausted. This is what happened today. It was really scary. This is life. Kids need to understand life. You can obviously shape it the way you know, but that's where you then are getting it out. If you don't get it out, it stays in. So it's healthy to talk to your loved ones. They will then understand you. It's not about us. It's about us in the world. You are constantly updating your wave, your probability wave, your experience. And by deeply connecting with others, that it's an enhancing mentality. We're in a world of competition, which is completely back to front. It damages the brain, but enhancement is what we can handle. So this thing that I'm a medical person, I've got to be able to handle this, which is our training. I had that training. I was told to be very clinical, to not connect with I'd never listened to that. We are empathetic at heart. We are wired for love. Empathy empowers. The research shows the more empathic you are, you increase your own resilience and healing by 68% and more. So connecting with others is vital. Honesty is vital. Crying is vital. Telling them, I feel like this, it's not you. A child that you are trying to hide your emotions from, and you're going to snap at them or do something or be distant, they're going to think they've done something wrong. Your husband's going to think that, or your wife's going to think they've done something wrong. So therefore, we need to express that. I feel like this because this happened. And so you go through the 5 steps: awareness, reflect. I feel like this. And that's the way. Reflect. I feel like this because. Maybe you could even draw a little picture or go into a little bit more depth. And I feel, and then the recheck is, okay, this is how I'm feeling, but what can I do for the next few moments to recover? I need to go have a hot bath. I need to watch something ridiculous on Netflix. I need to just go for a walk with you. I need to I need to just play with you and the dogs, whatever. And you've got to give yourself permission to do that. We've just got to think, I've got to be this perfect mom, this perfect friend, this perfect wife, this perfect. Because society tells us that, and I know we know that, but we've got to do that. You've got to give yourself permission to get the oxygen mask on your face before you put it on the person next to you in the plane.
Yes, so good. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Well, we are just so grateful for everything that you shared with us, but it doesn't stop here. I think one of my favorite things about Tiffany and why she is one of my best friends and where I would follow her anywhere is she's so great on seeing what each individual has to bring that's a unique gift to them, but how the whole system can come together and how we can empower and change as a community. And that really is the culture of Gals That Brunch. And what I'm really passionate about is I was at a magnet hospital when I first started with my new graduate program. Trainings like these are required in many facilities for nurses, even physicians. But as we've already seen, a lot of these trainings just end at the problem. And as we've seen with Dr. Caroline Leaf, she starts with the solution. And so if you are interested in bringing her into your organization and collaborating with her and even collaborating with research, because she has this amazing list of credentials for people's lives who have been changed, why not have medical staff be those people that get to be her subjects and have the transformation for themselves to benefit them and their patients. So if you are interested in partnering with us further with your community or your organization, we have a slide to...
I'm going to put your contact info in
Oh,
the chat.
she's putting my contact info in the chat. You can email me. We are very excited to collaborate and to really change this from the inside out. So thank you.
Sarah, if I may just quickly say something, I know you and I discussed in terms of working and collaborating. As a research scientist, for me, it's really important that and I'm also practical. So I don't do lab work, I do real world work, but everything we need to do research to build the system. So I have models in place now where I can go into an organization and do everything, training for CMEs, but also research. So the training can have a double whammy. So we can turn it into research, which then grows and scales up to others. We've done this is the result. So that's the kind of training you don't have to do it like that, but I would recommend that any kind of training or intervention is done as a research project as well, because that's really how you can get it scalable.
And this can play into clinical ladder, credentialing, there's so many benefits that just explode for everyone in this. So we're really passionate about getting this on the ground and so excited to have you, Dr. Leaf. We are so thrilled.
Thank you. I'm honored. I believe so much in helping with this and changing the system. It's heartbreaking to see what's going on. And if I can help in any way, that's what I'm here to do.
Yes, we're seeing it. So, well, thank you, everyone. Do you have anything you want to say in closing, Tiffany? Yep, nursing CEUs. And I want to say how I got my CEUs this last year was at Dr. Leaf's Mental Health Summit. It applied for both of my fields. I'm working in the coaching and consulting in mental health. I'm working in nursing, and I was able to get all the things I needed at this summit. It's credentialed, it's evidence-based. So there's all sorts of products that Dr. Leaf has to offer as well. She's got the Switch app, which I know she mentioned. So it takes you through all these steps every morning. I've started incorporating it in my routine, and it has literally been transformational and not at all heavy on the front end. It brings you into the flow. I saw a lot of questions about how do I get into the flow with these nervous systems? You do this over time, as she said, and this app is the best way to do it. And you mentioned a book that breaks
this is the app. I mean, I can show you. Do you want me to share the slide quickly? Do you want me to share the slide?
So you can screenshot it.
Yeah, you can screenshot. Let's get that. Where is it here? And this is the app is the most updated version of my work. Can you all see that?
Not quite.
Is it showing now?
Yep, it's there.
Okay, all right. Okay, so this is the most updated version. It's constantly getting updated, which is the great thing with technology. So, we're adding different elements on, and there's like a panic attack guide. And so there's a huge amount it's a great place to start. You can get into these 5 steps literally immediately with this. That's what I'd recommend. And then I have lots of books. If you go to drleaf.com, I mean, there's endless books there and resources and things. This one's great for building your brain and for mindsets. This for switching on your brain. There's one on also thinking and eating yourself smart, just in terms of there isn't a diet for the brain. Basically, because people always ask me, what is brain food? Brain food is real food. Eat real food mindfully, and that's in your mind controls your digestive system. 80% of that control comes from your mind. So, there's a lot of, and we have great blogs and podcasts. I interview some of the top people around the world in wellness. We're creating a mental health platform. So that's a great resource too. And we have all kinds of masterclasses that we are developing, and we're here to support in every way possible. And social media is a great also. Every day I'm putting up something that's going to help you.
Yes. You have done the work. So now it's just open and ready for us to plug it into the system. So this is a really exciting time we live in.
Yeah,
it is.
I so appreciate all the resources that you offer through social media. It's always such nice daily tidbits to be able to put into practice and just even reset. So I thank you for the time and intentionality that you put behind that. It's amazing.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, we're so thrilled that you all joined us today. Thank you again for being here. As we said, definitely make sure to download Dr. Leaf's app. Get the books. Get everything. I'm just putting our final slide up. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the time that you did just to stay present with us and getting active in the chat and whatnot. At Gals at Brunch, we always want to put resources and different pieces together that will help women thrive and be everything that they were created to be. And so we want to continue to put together partnerships and collaborations. And we so appreciate and are so thankful for Dr. Leaf taking time out of her morning to be with us. It was absolutely invaluable. And yeah, if you have questions or want to get involved, feel free to email us at hello@galsatbrunch.com. And then, like I mentioned, I put Sarah's contact information, sarah@revenuetribe.com, for ways about partnering with Dr. Leaf in her research. Do you have anything else?
Just a
I
final
know,
cheers.
final cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you, everyone.
We love
Thanks
you
so much.
guys.
Love you.
Bye.
Bye.